Hey everybody, it's John Michael Salvato, and we are back for season 7 of the Strega Mystica podcast. And today I'm really excited because, as many of you know, and I'll get this sort of out of the way right off the bat, we did take a little over a year off so that I could be able to be a caregiver for Craig when he went through 7 brain surgeries from last summer through last October. And so I thank everybody for your well wishes and your prayers and your condolences because we did lose Craig in March. And I decided that I was going to jump back in as we start every season on the Feast of All Souls. It just so happened, quote unquote, that a friend of mine in the publishing industry said, "Hey, are you scheduling people for the new season?" And I'm really excited that the person who's kicking off this season is my sister from another mister, Grace Fahrun, and many of you know her, so I'm not gonna do the 50-cent introduction. I'm going to say this is a powerhouse in our community, somebody who I just love talking to. And today we're going to talk about, like, I think topically, the sort of discussions that I'd have around the coffee table at this time of year with anyone else. And so I'm really thrilled that you could be with us, Grace. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So for folks who don't know, tell us a little bit about your background. You know, you're the author of the book Italian Folk Magic and another book that we'll talk about in a little bit. That sort of kind of bridges the experience of the folk magic that we grew up with. But tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where your family were from, and what got you started looking at a magical life.
Okay. Well, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Both my parents were Italian immigrants. They immigrated first to Canada in 1953. I'm an only child. My parents divorced in the early 70s, which was really weird and unusual and really not looked well upon from Italian immigrant community. And I was raised by my aunt and uncle in Montreal. My father is from Abruzzo. My mother was from Istria, which is northeastern Italy, and now it's Croatia. My aunt, of course, was my father's sister, so also Abruzzo, but my uncle was from Naples. And our neighbors were from Sicily, Calabria. So, and they were all immigrants, like post-war immigrants. And then later we had some neighbors that were Italian immigrants from the 60s, but these were people that grew up in Italy and then came as young adults. So
So
I
like
grew up,
second wave immigration?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So I was raised by people that were second wave immigration, and then a lot of our neighbors were then third wave immigration in the 60s. Right? But this was the generation that came out of war-torn Italy, got on a boat, the cheapest ticket they could get, right, riding in cargo. And so they were like tough people.
Well, that's a that's a good point for me to like ask this question that I've always wanted to know. One, I'll come back to because you mentioned where your mom's people are from is now part of Croatia. But so growing up, as you said, in that generation where our parents and grandparents had this connection to the strife, the struggle, the oppression, not only of war-torn Italy, but I had to bite my tongue when you said the one uncle was from Napoli, and then the other family members were from Sicily. My inner child was like, that's not. Napoli is Sicily too. They took it from us. So like there was also that identity of being colonized and being forced into an expression of a national what do you call identity
Yeah.
that was more nuanced than that. So in your house growing up, was folk magic a thing, that you experienced with your family members, or was it something that you got interested in later?
So in my upbringing, what we today in modern day call folk magic did not exist. That was considered religion. It was Catholic. It was, my gosh, don't even even intimate that it wasn't Catholic and devout and that it had anything at all to do with magic, let alone witchcraft. Mamma mia, don't even mention witchcraft. So it was, and this is something that I find that I mentioned to some people, because it's hard to grasp that it wasn't magical. Wasn't It was just the way we it's just the way we did things. There's nothing magical about it. If anything, it was quite lame because we were young and we're Americans, Canadians. Our parents and our nonas and everybody else's old ways were like, we wanted Oreo cookies and they were baking those other cookies like, once a week that we had to eat instead because we were young and we didn't appreciate things. So it's in hindsight that I revisited folk magic, or what we call today folk magic, because it doesn't have a name. You know this. I don't. Even in Italian authors, right? When they call it magia popolare, or magia operativa. It wasn't called. It was.
So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today is, we're at a time of year when we think about our ancestors of blood, our ancestors of tradition, ancestors of affinity. And so part of that connecting with our ancestors, for me anyway, and I want to hear what your take is on this, the root of the things we do, which was, how in English we would say, well, she's going to do that thing she does. Or my friends call me now and they'll say, can you do the thing you do? Because they know better than to call it anything else. And not that there's necessarily a pejorative idea for us as postmodern people
Exactly.
when we the word witchcraft. We have respect. I know you do too. We have lots of
Yep.
friends who draw from those traditions and some of the stuff that we do. But our tradition, our heritage tradition, and what is called folk magic now, wasn't the same as what witchcraft is. Witchcraft's a codified practice, and it's there's traditions and rituals and things you gotta say and things and initiations and all that. Where
Yeah.
for us it was for me it was our worldview. Everything was magical and nothing was called magical. So whatever you did, you were stirring a pot, it's magical. You're drinking water, it's magical. You're planting seeds, it's magical. Whatever you're doing is all magical, and none of it is magic because it's all, like you said, it was our spirituality, and the
Yeah.
spirituality was rooted in the earth. That it's hard to believe that there was Catholic threads there because it was so animistic, so rooted
Exactly.
in the magic of all things. So how was your experience with that growing up? Because you're a
Well,
lot younger than me.
growing up, it depends on who you were. It depends on the context. It was either viewed as religion or superstition, and then there was varying degrees of like when see when someone like if we go back 40 years ago and we talk about my parents' generation and then my grandparents' generation, right? People born in the 30s and then people born in the late 1800s. They defined it as they were Catholic, but some were a little superstitious, some were superstitious, and then some were very superstitious. And it's the subtle labeling of your level of superstition gave meaning or gave definition to what your worldview was. So someone who's very superstitious also, involved themselves in baneful magic. Someone who was somewhat superstitious believed in a magical, like they believed that in magical things, or they had a magical worldview, but they were a little more passive. And then you had the people that were a little superstitious, were afraid of the people that were practicing. They believed
Right.
it, they didn't practice, but they were afraid of the people that did. And that's
But they
how it
don't
and that's how it
look in.
fleshed itself out. Like that's how you observed it, or I observed it.
And sometimes when no one was looking, the ones that were scared would still go to the grandmother, the grandfather,
Absolutely.
the uncle, aunt, and say, I got a headache. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even they would even pay for baneful magic, right? But it was, and what I'm gonna say. So first of all, like you brought up, Italians are not a unified culture. It's 20 republics that got glued together politically. Every region has its own language, every region has its own customs, but there's like threads, right? Like that common threads. So that too works its way into the folk magic. So Northern Italians, although all of them were those three levels of superstitious, moderately superstitious, or very superstitious, maintained a more stoic veneer. A more stoic, no, not even stoic, more like secular veneer, because they were also less likely to be very openly, religiously, what's the word? Southern Italians are warm, like, their saints are like their friends. San Michele came from France. He came to visit me because I had a stomach ache. Like those kind of incantations, they're from the South. You don't see that kind of stuff in regions north, let's say, of Rome. So
And I think we see that because of the other influences too. Like the North is heavily Germanically
yeah,
influenced from those pre-German tribes and
yeah,
Hungarian tribes.
yeah. So it's a different flavor, and I completely lost track of what we were talking about.
Do that all the time here.
I
That's
know.
what the show. We should just call it rabbit holes. So, but we haven't lost too badly because that was a perfect segue. It's why I love having you on the show because we can have these conversations and they just flow based on what we're talking about. Like there's no, it's the easiest gig I've ever had. I don't have to have notes. I don't have to have a script or any of that. So one of the things you just said that I was a thread that I wanted to pull on is how these 20 to 26 different regions and languages and literally cultures in our heritage affected what quote unquote Italian folk magic looks like. But I'm wondering in the broader picture, and I'll ask you too at this point to just kind of like uh, share if it's appropriate why that makes your book so timely, your new book, which I didn't even tell anybody what on. I meant to do that in the beginning. So the book here is Living Folk Magic, and the subtitle is Crafting Your Own Magical Life. There's something that just as soon as I read it, I wanted to talk to you about. That's not necessarily part of the book, but pulling that thread from your mom's people, it seems to me in the world that we're in right now, this moment, with the chaos and all of the craziness that's going on, it's time. It feels timely. It feels like a salve to be able to say, you know what, where my mom's people were from, that's now Croatia. Where my mother's people were from was once Hungary, and prior to that, it was part of almost Romania. And so, even though the identities at the time that our parents were born might have shifted, the tradition still comes through. The
Yeah.
animism still comes through. The spirits of that land were still the spirits of that land. Do you think there's maybe, because we all know authors don't write books to get rich, but do you think maybe there was like something inside of you in the ether itself that says, hey, maybe it's time that folk magic gets its day in the sun, and we understand that every tradition has folk magic in it?
I think, well, it may have been fueled for my search, my personal search for meaning, my personal search for understanding of where I come from. Because, like you just described, even where our ancestors came from is not where they came from anymore. And I would say that that is valid for everyone.
Explain that.
Well, for example, I'll give my example. Where my mother was from was Italy when she was born there. It is now Croatia. Not to go into too much detail, but my maternal grandparents were both slaughtered in the genocide that occurred to the Italians that occupied that territory. And that happened just after the Second World War. It is now Croatia. That means that I was searching, well, it's now Croatia. It was previously Yugoslavia. And it just so happens that my mom is from a part of the world where at every world war the border changed. And with
Yeah.
the Austro-Hungarian Empire and all that stuff, right? That means we're more alike than we are different because of this. And this was my personal search for meaning and identity, because there's so much that hinges nowadays, where everyone wants to label themselves. They want to make sure they do 23andMe and all that stuff, and they have their DNA tested to see where they're from, because they want to be able to label themselves specifically, ethnically, but culturally. Anywhere you go, there's common thread, and the one common thread that dates all the way back, no matter what you read, no matter who you talk to, it's folk magic. Every time in history had folk magic, every culture has folk magic. And that's what drew me. That's the rabbit hole I fell into.
Thank goodness, because the value that you bring like to these conversations is so helpful. And I always like to say, like, there's it helped me, and this recent book helped me as well, to let go of some of the things that gave me the most agita in my life, which was, as I'm sure you already know where I'm going with this, seeing young, like I don't remember whether they're millennials or Gen X's, I don't whatever the youngest of those groups, seeing some of them on Instagram and TikTok, and deciding that they are somehow an authority on Italian folk magic, and then talking about practices that are clearly just Wicca with a little bit of oregano
Yeah.
thrown on it. For a long time, it just made me frustrated because I thought, you know, you've got a backstory that's already yours, and it's already uniquely yours, and it's beautiful. And why can't you celebrate that? Why do you have to appropriate and then throw more misinformation and disinformation into the mix? And then as I was reading your most recent book, it just like kind of hit me that, you know what? It doesn't even matter, because they didn't have the benefit that we had of growing up in this world where nobody had to say the word magic. And yet we knew that everything was magic.
Yeah.
And when everything's magic, then for me, like, to put it in spiritual terms, then everything becomes a sacrament, and everything's a ritual, and everything's, wait and see, like, how it's going to unfold. But like, how lucky are we that we grew up in a
Everything is
world?
meaning. Everything is the creator talking to us, communicating with us directly through nature, through weather, through that spiritual connection is not something that you can purchase or manufacture or label. It's either it's experienced.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And you don't have, like, I'm the first one to go and buy, trinkets and things that make us that make us feel good in the moment. So I'm not knocking ritual tools, but to know that everything, in fact, you talk about this in your first book, that everything that you need for the four elements is already in the kitchen. You're using them every day. You don't need to have to go and buy this little implement and this implement. And you got a knife already. You got a spoon. You've got a pot. You've got gas. All those things.
Yeah.
So it just made me, reading Living Folk Magic, just made me say, maybe it's time to just show a little more compassion and grace to these people that are out there. And then this other, scholar who said she's codified Italian folk magic, when what's codified is nothing like what we grew up with. But it makes sense because she grew up in a world where witchcraft and Wicca and all that stuff already existed, and I'm
Yeah,
sure back in Italy that's become integrated.
for sure.
And so that leads me to another thing I wanted to get your take on, and it's something that I think I sense that a lot of people that are watching this are going to really resonate with this. They see pop culture witchcraft, and it's fantastic for what it is and what it does for the people that it resonates with. But they may find themselves struggling because so much of a tradition that is a religion in and of itself, like neo-paganism or a series of different religions, intersectional, so much of that requires us to use a lot of new age mental practices like creative visualization and manifestation, blah 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 blah. And in your book, you talk about having aphantasia and not being able to visualize something clearly the way that another person would.
Yeah, it comes in and out. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
And so is there, because that's something that I have difficulty with. Do you feel, I'm trying to ask questions that aren't leading. Do you feel that that is another reason why folk magic just resonates so clearly is that we're not having to do all those kind of new age tricks?
Well, I think folk magic resonates just because it's natural is probably not the word I'm looking for, but it's because it's innate in us, folk magic. It starts out with our children, with our imagination when we're playing. If you're playing with your little figures, little army men, little monkeys in a barrel and stuff like that. We start out creating altars as children. No, I know. Look, I hate that old Horry Chestnut where someone says, "Oh, I've been magical my whole life since I was a child. I used to cast spells." You know what I mean? Because the only reason I hate it is because yeah, all children are like that. We show up, it's you're a priest, man. It's like, we are born innocent, right? We are also born innocent in the fact that we have no restrictions. We show up in the world and we are taught restriction. We don't have restriction when we show up as children, as babies and all this stuff, and we're exploring. And yeah, we're all magical when we're, before it's beaten out of us or taught, or religioned out of us. You know where I'm going with this. So that's
And we
why folk magic is it's accessible to everybody. Even if you were like, if you are any kind of disability, if you are afflicted by any kind of disability, it does not prevent you from engaging with folk magic. There's no
yeah.
barrier.
The children organically don't say, okay, we're going to play cowboys and or cops and robbers. And okay, so I'm going to be a cop, so I have to visualize what a cop is. No, they just become a cop.
Yeah,
And
they
they
just
they
assume
just
they assume the role and they start
yeah.
running.
And that to me was a good example of what folk magic was for me because it wasn't something we did. It wasn't like okay, this is the ritual that you do for this. It's, oh, so and so has a headache, we'll bring them here. And then you just did the things that we do. And then when you're cooking, you just do the things that you do. There's strife going on in the house. So this one's fighting, that one's fighting. So as I'm cooking, I'm bringing that intention to the cooking, but I'm not doing, double, double, twirl
But
and
not
trouble.
doing it
I'm just,
intentionally.
yeah. So the energy just flows, just like the kid becomes the cop or the kid becomes the robber.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think, I know that you do not, you're like me when it comes to being an author, and what matters most to you is actually bringing the value, not hyping the book, not,
Yeah.
like our publishers want us to hype a book because their focus and their motivation is the sale. As authors, our motivation is to bring somebody something that maybe they hadn't thought about before, or to affirm something for them that nobody else has ever affirmed for them, to make them feel seen. And I have to say that I know you'll be less comfortable with talking about your book because that's just the person you are. I have to say that your book, this book, just makes all of the things that made you a superstar in the minds of the Italians and Sicilians of the world. This is doing the same thing, in my opinion, for the rest of the world. So get
Okay.
ready because it just feels like it's the beginning of a new chapter because it's going to reach those people just like your first book did. Those people who felt like I mean, if it wasn't for your first book, I wouldn't have been able to open my school during the pandemic because the way that I found all of the people who wanted to dig deep into their family roots and family traditions and kind of do the anthropological unpacking of all that was that the one thing we all had in common was we had all read your book. I was, I think, the last one in the group to get your book. And I'm like, oh my God, how did I not see this book? Mainly because I stay out of that section of the bookstores, so I don't get agita. And I was like,
Yeah,
I
it's
should go
important to prevent
and
the act.
I met you, I met Dee, I met so many people, Antonio, and so I really think I just want to like thank you for what you've done because I know that we don't have to talk about what's inside the book. That there's already people who are saying find out for me when the book comes out, when it's available for pre-sale and everything else, because I want this because of what's going on in the world around us. Because we can't always, especially now, there's even more reasons why we might not want to set an altar and, create a circle of salt on the ground and all of that stuff. And in your book, you talk about, that we don't have to set an altar blatantly either. So I want to thank you for that first, but I want to ask you, as much as you can, to maybe separate the author you away from the practitioner you. And as a practitioner, this is going to be the toughest question I ask.
Okay.
As a practitioner, what would you encourage people to take away from your book? So not as the author who knew what they were writing, who knew the material, but as the practitioner who knows just how timely this moment is and how much we can accomplish in our world if we start to allow our worldview to become magical rather than, oh, it's Tuesday night, the coven meets, I'm going to go and do my magic.
I think practitioner me wants to emphasize the importance that all magic begins at home. It begins with the world is crazy. We don't have to go into the details about how crazy the world is right now. And it could be extremely, I find it very paralyzing to start thinking, well, I can't change what's going on out there. I can't help on a large scale. But that's because we need to start in our home, in our community. Magic to protect your home, magic to protect your community. Take care of the people, the needy people in your proximity. Protection and and also food and whatever else they need. I think that what's going on in the world right now is not new. It's not new, but we can't pretend it's not because we got social media and we have 24/7 broadcasts telling us what's going on. Back in my parents' day, they didn't have that. So the focus was always on family, community. And I think that's where we need to the practitioner me is going back to that. I have to tell you, this past year, I too experienced loss. And then with everything that's going on, to go internal with your practice. To what I want people to get from my book is what I got from writing it. Reflect on your connection to spirit, your connection to the land you live on, your connection um this because remember when I mentioned that it because of my heritage, it had me seeking and going down the rabbit holes to find meaning, to find identity. Well, no, we already have identity. We are us. We are we where we are. And that's where our strength is. The spirits of the land we live on, the spirits of our home, of our community. Instead of watching, okay, I'm going to try to word this, but you know me, it's like I'm always going to say something that's going to offend somebody. So I'm sorry in advance. Instead of watching performances of what folk magic looks like, performances of what altruism looks like, performance, like it's all theater. It's all theater. Look, I'm glad it's there because it's very inspiring, right? I look at it as an art form and I'm inspired by what other people are doing. But as actual practice, it starts within us. It's our connection to our spirits. It's our connection to ourselves because what no one talks about is that a lot of our magic begins with our relationship to ourselves. It's like our mind and our soul, right? That's the first relationship we have. And that's the first relationship you have to nurture. I
Yeah,
hope
and it's
that made
microcosm
sense.
sacrifice. That was absolutely amazing, like a master class in 5 minutes, and exactly what I was hoping for from you on that. Because I think as you were talking, I was thinking of the fact that with the hurricane devastating the islands and in Jamaica, the word they don't say we. In Jamaica, in patois, the word for we is I and I because there's no difference between what I perceive as you and me. And so the only way then that I can make a difference in this world, if it's I and I, then I need to start with the I that's closest to me,
Hmm.
to go in and recognize that essential unity, to say that just like it starts from our mind and goes to our heart, in the beginning of the cosmos, it started from a universal mind and went to the universal compassion. Everything, and that's, like in one of my books, I call that the anatomy of a spell. That this is what we're doing all the time. And like I use anatomy of a spell with a slight eye roll because, spells get pigeonholed into this little thing that if I say these
Yeah,
words, we're creating spells all day long. And, about ourselves, about the world we live in, that's why I'm mindful to call the stuff that's going on craziness rather than what my analytical mind would like to label it, because I'm not going to reinforce that,
exactly.
you know,
That's why I was
and
very
that's
careful because I don't want to reinforce it either.
I totally got it. I knew where you were going. You did that. So I want to, I really try to keep these to 30 minutes. And I always say at the beginning of every season, I'm going to accomplish it this year. It's already been 35. So I'm just in wrapping it up. I can't think of a better way to wrap it up than with what you shared, with that message as the practitioner. I think as far as I'm concerned, that's the best layup that I could ever give, to why this book made a difference for me, why I was inspired by it, and why I decided, that it was, we say in Yiddish, beschert. It was meant to
Oh, the
be
shirt.
that I that I jump back into this, in the midst of grief, to to contribute something, because I recognize I'm not the only one grieving. I'm not the only one who lost something this year, and that the losses that could follow deserve to be seen and heard, and for us to show up. People showed up for me. It's my turn to show up for other people, and you just made that so much easier to do
Makes
by
my heart
bringing us a
happy.
book like that, and by bringing the conversation. I mean, I can't I can't thank you enough. If it were up to me, we would do this all the time, but I know neither one of us is unbusy. But we should jump on and do this more often, because I enjoyed this.
100%, 100%. Reach out anytime and we'll make it work.
I'm thrilled. This broadcast is if you're watching it right now on the 2nd of November, then you're watching the raw feed. There will be another broadcast of this that looks cleaner and more polished, and I won't be any prettier, sorry. But I will make sure that gets broadcast, and that, we can send it out to our social channels. And then if you have any questions, because I've been watching the chat and I don't see any questions, but that doesn't mean there aren't any,
I see
because
like
I'm
the
me.
little chat bubble. I see 6, but I can't see.
Yeah, me. Oh, so yes. So we're going to go over, because I'm not letting these 6 people. Thank you for chiming in. We've got Jillian, um, said hello, happy to be here. Joe
Okay, I can
Duta,
see. Hi, Joseph. Hi, Jillian.
Dave
My
Living.
goodness. Entropy Apothecary.
Oh, and they're going
I'm I I think her name is Susan. I hope I'm right. Oh my gosh.
It's occasionally run on good theater. Entropy Apothecary says, I agree. Succinct, blunt, and brilliant. Weekly, please. Oh, see, now they want us. Now they want us to do this every week, guys. I just want to thank you so much. And Joseph says, "Ciao, ragazzi." So nice to see you both. So thanks. Sorry I didn't see that during the broadcast. This is a new platform for me this year. And Grace, thank you so much. We will definitely do this again.
Thank you.
And everybody who tuned in. Next, I should have actually looked at the calendar to see who our next guest is going to be on next week's program, and I haven't got a clue. I think it might be. We'll see how I can multitask. I think I know who next week's might be. This broadcast, by the way, is going to be a broadcast that is not just confined to. I don't chew gum and talk very well, so you have to be a nurse to do that. Okay. All right. So next week at the same time, we'll be talking with a couple, Catholic conjure practitioners about contemplative spirituality and
Oh,
magical practice. So that'll be at 3 o'clock next week, and we'll look forward to seeing all of you then. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
bye. Thank you again.
Let's see.